and welcome to Jesus for Asia Now. I'm Natalie Wood and I have a very special guest with me in the studio today. It's Tim Maddocks, and he with his family have been in Cambodia working incarnationally for 30 years. Hello Tim, so glad you could be here today.
Hello Natalie, I'm really blessed to be here.
When I introduced you, I said you've been working incarnationally in Cambodia for 30 years. What does that mean, incarnationally?
Incarnationally means we're living like the people that live around us. And that's changed over the last 30 years. So when we originally went out, actually in 1996, to live on the campus where we live now, it was just rice fields. And the people that lived around us were extremely poor. They lived in thatched houses mostly, got around on both bicycles or old motorcycles. So that's the way we lived back then. But our community has changed over time. So now people more live in brick houses. Many of them have air conditioning. So we've upgraded housing as our community's upgraded housing.
You still don't have air conditioning though.
We have windows.
Yeah. So you mentioned moving out to the campus where you live now. Can you explain what happens on the campus? Just give us like an overview of the ministry as a whole?
Yeah, sure. So it's a 40-acre campus, and to begin with, God called us to church plant in our local community and to develop a training center where people could learn to be church planters and share the gospel with Cambodians who hadn't yet heard about Christ, which is the majority of the population. And
what kind of percentage Christian are we talking
it's about 3% Christian.
Really? Okay.
We started that work and we got into medical work as well, and then into school, education of young people, and then an orphanage, and then a media center, and a butterfly garden, and a tropical plant garden center. And so that's sort of the progression of our work over the years.
That's all on that same campus?
On the same campus. And we have another school on a smaller campus about 25 miles away. It's not an international school where you've got all these rich kids coming and paying big fees. In fact, our fees are very, very low. We're charging for a non-Adventist just $200 a year. For an Adventist, $170 US a year.
Wow. That's not very much.
It certainly doesn't make a profit or even break even.
Wow. So how many students do you have in the school?
So in our main school we have 220 students from kindergarten to grade 12.
Okay.
And in the smaller school we have 18 students from grade 1 to 3.
Are they all like local to the schools, or is there a dorm situation, or how does that work?
So our student body is made up of children from the local community, and they will come in from about as far as 3 miles away. And then we have our orphanage children. We've children from the orphanage. We currently have 38 in the orphanage, and staff children. But then we have another group of children who come from our rural churches, and most of them in the Siem Reap province, but from other provinces as well. And we have 62 in the dormitory now.
Okay. So how does it work financially for the dorm students?
Well, the dorm students are almost all coming from really poor families. So we're charging them $170 a year for tuition, and we provide free lodging and food in the dorm. So this is a part of our faith-based ministry. The way I look at these children is that they're God's children, and usually a father pays. So he's paying for their fees, and so we're just trusting him to provide. As far as what does it cost, we spend $1.20 per day for food, plus we have the hire for the 3 cooks. And this year we don't have deans that we hired because my wife Wendy and I, we are the deans. And the kids live in large rooms with bunk beds, and so they get to hang out together. The dormitory set up so we have girls' dorm on one side of the building, boys on the other side, a large cafeteria in the middle. And so we have combined worships together in the mornings and evenings. Okay. And then they eat together in the cafeteria.
Okay. So you said $1.20. Is that per child per day?
Per child per day.
Okay.
3 meals.
Wow. That's 40 cents a meal. That's not very much.
It's not much. But a lot of the kids, they don't want to go home during holidays because they get more to eat and better food at the school than they do if they go home. The reality is that out in the countryside, poverty is a serious thing.
Yeah.
People are just eking out an existence still.
Right, and even that little amount that you're spending per day for each one of them is giving them such better food.
Yeah, it
It's a
changes the
blessing.
way they look. So they come in looking scrawny and their hair doesn't look healthy. But by the time they spend a year in the school, they're on a vegetarian diet and they look much
And they're
more
getting
rounded
good
out and
meals
healthy.
every day.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
wow.
I get a lot of joy out of being their dean this year, leading them in worships, helping them to know Christ better, preparing them to be missionaries themselves.
Okay, so that's another question. Okay, so the purpose of the school isn't just for education.
No, the education is the excuse. So, you know, my family are there as missionaries. We want to take the gospel to all Cambodia, but we can't do that alone.
Right.
And because there's only around 4,600 Adventists in the country of a population of 6.5 million. So the best way to raise missionaries is to educate them from kindergarten up, but educate them with the mindset that God has called them to share the gospel. And their education is to help them to be able to do that.
You, in grades 11 and 12, it's not just like regular school. You're teaching them other things as well. So
Throughout the school, we teach a lot of vocational things because we believe that there's more to education than just reading, writing, and arithmetic. So we have cooking and sewing and computer classes, art classes, photography classes, woodwork classes. But in year 11 and 12, we teach the young people to be teachers. And many of them will take that up as a career. And in year 12, they actually teach for 5 periods a week in the primary school.
okay.
And so they get that experience, and that actually provides us with a pool of teachers when they graduate. And of our 30 teachers that we have in the main school, 25 of them are former students.
Wow, that's awesome. And I know that you've mentioned that some of them are recent graduates.
Yeah, we have some that graduated just in July last year, and they're actually teaching in the high school this year.
Wow, so they're teaching young people almost their same ages.
Yeah, some of the people they're teaching were fellow students with them the year before. So it's quite a challenge for them.
Yeah.
The reason for that is that we have depended on volunteers. And when COVID hit, our volunteer pool sort of dried up.
Yeah.
So we've had to depend on our own young people. But if there are people out there that would like to volunteer, we'd like to hear from them.
Yeah, volunteer teachers. Now, what kind of subjects?
Teaching English, mathematics, science, geography. So they don't have to be qualified teachers. They just have to be willing to be qualified by the Holy Spirit.
Okay, so you said volunteer. What does that mean? When they come to work there, do they get a small stipend? What do they receive from
We
you?
are faith-based, so we're trusting in God, and we like our volunteers to do the same. So we provide them with housing and with work,
Okay,
and that's it.
so they need to have some other place to get money for food and
They need
things
to
like
cover their airfares, their visa costs, their food costs, etc. Yeah.
Okay. You talked about faith-based, and then you talked about how much it costs for the school. Does it ever come up short? I mean, what if the parents can't afford the $170 or the $200? Then what happens?
They usually come crying to me, literally,
Oh.
down on their knees begging. But there's no actual need for that because we've never sent a child home because they couldn't pay. And typically what happens after 1 or 2 years, if debts are stacking up, we just wipe the debt off, figuring that, well, God got us through the school year, so never mind, we'll just start afresh the next year. But sometimes parents, sort of out of embarrassment, they'll just pull the kid out without even telling us. And we find out after they've left because they feel ashamed that they can't pay.
Oh, that's hard.
It
That's
is.
hard.
And sometimes it's because the family's borrowed money to build a new house or buy a motorbike, and they can't repay, so they need a child in order to have another income.
Work.
Which really annoys me because, we'll sponsor a child and they'll be doing really well in school, and then the parent pulls them out, and it's like, this kid could have had a really great future.
Yeah, and made a lot more money in the long run.
Yes.
And worked for God.
But short-term thinking and...
Yeah, that seems to be a trap that happens in a lot of ultra-poor areas.
Yeah. So we look at the school finance. For example, last year we took in $17,000 in school fees, and we spent $88,000 running the school. So we're trusting in God to provide.
He makes up the difference.
Yes.
So, okay, faith-based. Let's try to break this down. Like, what does this look like on a daily basis? Like, okay, so faith-based, does this mean that you write a letter to your donors and you say, hey, we're short on school fees this month? Or what does this mean?
Well, there are obviously many faith-based models, but the model that God called us to was to just trust Him. And so we do write a letter from time to time, like once or twice a year, which we call prayer journal. And we talk about what God has been doing in our lives. We don't go out there soliciting funds. But if somebody asks us how can they help, then we're happy to give them a list of ways that they could choose to help us.
Okay.
So we're just taking our needs to God. Most of the time, we're not talking to Him much about the money we need. We're praising Him for what He's given us.
Okay, that was going to be my next question. Like, do you walk around and you see, oh, there's a broken pipe over there. Lord, can you give me the money to fix the broken pipe? Or
I've tried to develop the mentality that this is God's work and I'm working beside Him. And so He knows what is needed, and He's just left me there to fix it. And so if I need to spend money, I'll go out and spend it. Sometimes I'll even put it on the credit card if I don't have it, because making sure people are comfortable is more important than not using my credit card. But God has been good and He pays things off. Sometimes, often in the last year particularly, we've been going day by day. And it's like, I might need, for example, I might need $50 today to buy supplies or to buy things to repair something like that. And God will provide just enough. But over a month, we're spending at least $16,000 a month to keep the orphanage and the school, and the media center, and Butterfly Paradise and Garden Center all running.
wow. Okay, so $50 a day, $100, $300, whatever you need that day.
It's coming in.
God's providing.
Little by little, yeah. It's a fun way to live.
Yeah, yeah. So tell us the story of the studio, the media center. How did that come to be?
So in 2009, a dream that we'd had for a long time, that John Wood was involved in planting in our minds, we began to make that happen by building a studio. And now we did something that most people would say was very foolish. We got a $200 donation for the studio, so we started building.
Whoa, okay.
And 15 months later, we had spent $70,000. We finished the building, and we never asked anybody for money. God provided. And He honored the faith that we showed by starting, and He provided. There was a period of time when the building was a shell with no roof and grass growing up in the main recording area. And I was there one night talking to God about it. But shortly after that, He provided all the money to pour the concrete, put the roof on, finish the building. But He had a purpose for delaying, and it was only later that I discovered the purpose.
Is that something you'd like to share, His purpose for delaying?
Yeah. So we had a group of students coming from Australia to help out on the project. And amongst those students were kids that weren't Seventh-day Adventists, that weren't Christian. And God wanted to let them see miracles actually happen.
Okay.
To convict them. And so when those miracles were happening while the students were there, like somebody came and handed me $10,000 for the roof while the students were there. And so before they left, the steel for constructing the roof was on site. They saw that. And working together to pour the concrete slab. God was just using it all. So the studio was actually being used for evangelism before it was even had a roof on it.
So that illustrates that God doesn't always need the media recordings.
That's right, yeah.
Well, that's awesome. So speaking of the media recordings, what kind of things do you record there?
So we record evangelistic videos in the Khmer language, and we also do health videos and cooking shows, vegetarian cooking shows, some children's stuff, and also we're just getting into music, Christian music now.
Okay, that's a lot.
Yeah, we have 8 staff working full time, but they also teach media in the school as well.
So they have a couple of jobs under the media banner,
yes,
but it's not all just in the studio.
yes.
So have you seen any results of the shows, of the programs that you have recorded?
That's the trouble with media. You're putting it out there. We have a 24/7 online television station called Simkin TV. And then we have our YouTube channel. People are watching, but is it having an impact?
It's hard to know.
That's harder to say, although I had one of our Khmer pastors come up to me last year and thank us for the series on Revelation that we'd done. And so he was watching and he had been blessed by it. So I'm sure that there are people that are coming to Christ through it. We just don't have the privilege of knowing that yet.
Right. That seems like what happens so much with broadcasting. It's like, it's literally when the Bible says cast your bread upon the waters and it'll come back after many days. It's like many days aren't here yet.
I think a lot of it is like our own members are watching. And so it's
building up the
building
church.
up their faith and building up their churches, yeah. And so then they are able to take what they are learning and share it on a one-on-one basis. So we used to do the training programs to prepare people to be missionaries. But you could say in a sense now that we're still doing that, but it's on video, and people all over the country and even outside the country can access it and learn from it.
Now let's move to Butterfly Paradise. What is Butterfly Paradise, first of all, and how did it get started?
So Butterfly Paradise is a very large butterfly garden, which is netted in. So you could call it a butterfly aviary. And it grew out of a idea that a friend of mine had, that because we're so close to town, because we have lots of butterflies on our 40-acre property, that we could set up a butterfly garden for tourists. Because tourists, they come to Siem Reap to look at the Angkor Wat temple. And many of them, once they've done the temples, it's like, what else can I do? And me being a biologist by training and having visited butterfly gardens in the past, it's like, that's a nice idea. But I'm busy running a lot of other things. And I took it to God, and I tried to argue him out of the idea, but he eventually won. So it's like, well, God, if I'm going to do this for you, it has to be first class. We can't build a little cage out of sticks and invite foreign visitors to come in. And it has to be so that people can learn that God is creator. So we spent about $400,000, which in American terms is maybe not very much, but in Cambodia, that's quite a bit. Right. And we built one of the largest caged butterfly gardens in the world. And I believe that it is a first-class attraction. In fact, on Google at the moment, we have a 4.4 star rating.
Awesome.
So we're very thankful for that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, having been there, it's like, it's so impressive. You know, you see it and it's like, wow, what can God do? And you know, we walk in and we know the story, but it's like to just see it in fruition. I mean, in its full, built up, flowered out, butterflies flying around. It's just like, wow, God did this, you know, because how much did you have when you started that?
We didn't have anything.
and you had calculated and budgeted how much was this going to cost?
It was going to cost $400,000, and we spent $400,000.
And you had nothing when you started.
And nothing. And so it was another faith venture, a little bit like the building of the studio. But it's like we were sure God wanted us to do it. And if he wanted us to do it, he was going to provide the resources for it. Right. But we had to walk forward in faith, trusting him. And often it was last-minute provision.
Okay, so like the workers were working and you had to pay them at the end of the day and
That's right. Friday afternoon, have to pay them for the week's work. Wages are small there, so the amounts were pretty small, like the $500 a week for wages. But Friday afternoon, 3 o'clock, absolutely no money. I can't borrow money, I can't do anything except pray. And so I was having a discussion with God about what we're going to do if the money doesn't come in by 5 o'clock. We're going to have to lay off the workers. And an hour later, someone knocked on the door, handed me $500. And they didn't know about the need, but God did, and He provided.
wow.
And a month later, the same thing happened again. And it was at that point I realized, okay, God's got it under control. Just don't worry about it. Just go forward and finish it.
So you stopped having those Friday afternoon discussions with him?
Yeah, I just went forward trusting it's going to be there. And we were always able to pay.
Wow, praise the Lord. That's really neat to see the progression or the step-by-step walk, because so many times we talk about having a faith walk and it's some nebulous thing with no definition. It's like, what does that even look like?
If you don't know God, it's frightening.
Yeah.
Because for us, like, we're on basically the edge of bankruptcy every month. And yet we know that God's not going to let us go bankrupt. This is His work. And
Right.
so we just go forward in faith.
So Butterfly Paradise, when you first started it, the whole process, you thought it was going to be a financial burden or a blessing?
Well, I looked at the figures and said, okay, we're having about 4 million visitors coming to Siem Reap a year. If we can get 100 a day to the Butterfly Garden, we will generate enough income to cover our whole ministry needs and also expand or help out other ministries. Well, God wanted to teach me something, and that is that we don't need to make money to keep our ministry going. He called us to be faith-based. And so we've been running Butterfly Paradise for 4 years now. And to my knowledge, we haven't yet broken even on a single month. But God has kept us running. And through COVID, the country closed down. There were no foreign visitors. And so for nearly 2 years, we didn't have foreign visitors. We lowered our entry price, so that the local Cambodian people could come in. And so we charged $2 a person. If it's just one person now, electricity costs while they are there, running the waterfalls, etc., are more than the ticket price. But God provided, so we just kept it open all through COVID, even when we were in a red zone. And God has shown me that Butterfly Paradise is there to show that He is an almighty God and that He is a creator God.
Right. And it's a testimony to His greatness as well.
It's also providing employment for some of our young people so they can have employment where they're not required to work on Sabbath. And there's a testimony as well, because they're all young people out of our school that are running Butterfly Paradise. Like, I've been away for nearly 5 weeks now. It's my staff that are keeping it running. And God is equipping them as well so that they can run this tourist industry. My manager is either 19 or 20 years of age, only out of school for 2 years now, but God is giving her skills and helping all the other staff as well.
Okay, so beyond financial, what are some of the lessons of faith you've learned over the years in this walk that you've been having?
I think probably the most valuable one is that failure is not an option for God. His problem is not His resources. His problem is me. Because if I don't trust Him, there's no point in providing the needs. So He wants me to work side by side with Him and just to trust Him as the one in charge, as the one with the resources, and to move forward. And if I will go forward in faith, then He will provide. And He's always done that. And that's been one of the things that's been a real joy for me, to be able to partnership with God and know that He's got my back covered. because it's his work. But it's not just his work, it's our work, because I'm a child of God, and so I'm working with him on his kingdom. But it's because I'm his child, it's my kingdom as well. And that's been a real joyful thing for me. So my challenge has been obviously not to worry. If I worry, then I'm not honoring God, because it shows I don't trust him. And God has taught me, don't stress, don't worry. Years and years of experience now says that he'll come through, and in different ways. So it might be the weather. Sometimes we're doing something and we don't need it to rain. Other times we do need it to rain, and we can trust God to provide.
It will be the right weather.
Yeah.
So in all these lessons that God's been teaching you over the years, have you ever thought about what if you said no?
Yeah, that's one of the most frightening things to think about, because I can look at what God has done with our family over the last 30 years in Cambodia, and I realize that through our personal witness, through the school, through our lay training programs, God has impacted the church across the whole country. And if we had said, no, God, we're not going to do that for you, then there would probably be well over 1,000 people not in the church today. And that's a horrifying thought.
Yeah.
So I'm so thankful that God convicted me to say yes and to get involved in this ministry. I do have one regret.
What's
and
that?
It's taken me so long to really trust God. Because if I had trusted him back then like I trust him today, he could have got so much more done.
Well, thank you, Tim, for being here today and for sharing the stories of what God's doing in Cambodia. And we're excited for the future.
It's a privilege to be here, to be able to share, and hope the testimony has blessed people.
Yeah. I would like to thank you for joining us today. And if you would like to be a part of this ministry, please pray for Tim and Wendy and his family and the workers there as they endeavor with God to reach the people of Cambodia for eternity. If you would like to be a part of this ministry, you can contact us at Jesus for Asia, P.O. Box 1221, Collegedale, Tennessee 37315. Call us at 423-413-7321 or visit our website at jesusforasia.org. May God richly bless you until we see you next time on Jesus for Asia Now.